Injustice doesn't always come with a warning. It often arrives in uniform. In the heart of Memphis, beneath a crumbling overpass, two homeless black men shared laughter, survival, and silence. When police targeted them during a routine cleanup, they saw nothing but disposable lives. Officer Rourke never imagined the quiet one, Jeremiah Booker, was anything but broken. He didn't see the steel behind the stillness, or the fire buried beneath the dirt. He didn't know Jeremiah was once Delta Force, but when Rourke pulled the trigger on the wrong man's only friend, he set off a war he couldn't see coming. Justice walks now. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The Memphis sun crept over the horizon, painting the city's concrete canyons in shades of amber and gold. Steam rose from a rusted fire barrel, its orange flames dancing against the morning chill. Two men huddled near its warmth, their shadows stretching long across the cracked pavement. Jeremiah "Ghost" Booker stood perfectly still, his weathered hands extended toward the fire. His dark eyes scanned the street with practiced precision, missing nothing. Beside him, Reggie "Slim" Dillard let out a deep, rumbling laugh that echoed off the surrounding buildings. "Man, you remember that time in '82? Slim's voice carried the warmth of aged bourbon. "When old Tommy tried to convince everyone he was James Brown's cousin?" A slight smile crossed Jeremiah's face. "Fool couldn't dance worth a dime." "But he sure tried." Slim's shoulders shook with laughter. "Spun himself right into that dumpster." Though their clothes were worn and patched, both men carried themselves with an unmistakable dignity. Slim moved with the loose-limbed grace of a jazz musician, while Jeremiah's movements were measured and precise, each gesture economical. From the shadow of a nearby doorway, a young man watched them through the cracked screen of his iPhone. Little D adjusted his focus, capturing the way the morning light played across their faces. "Y'all don't mind if I get this for my documentary, right?" Little D called out, his voice eager. "People need to see the real stories out here." Slim spread his arms wide, theatrical. "Document away, young blood. Though Ghost here ain't exactly Hollywood material." He nudged Jeremiah with his elbow. Jeremiah's only response was a quiet grunt, but his eyes never stopped their careful sweep of the surroundings. The smell of coffee and bread drifted through the air as Mama Cass's ancient shopping cart rattled around the corner. The elderly woman's voice boomed across the empty street. "Breakfast time, children. Can't face the day on an empty stomach." Several other homeless people emerged from doorways and makeshift shelters, drawn by her call. Mama Cass handed out wrapped sandwiches with the efficiency of a veteran lunch lady, but each came with a personal touch, a pat on the shoulder, a word of encouragement, a stern reminder to stay warm. "Ghost, Slim, get over here and eat something before you waste away," she commanded, waving them over. As they approached, Little D kept filming, capturing the way the community moved like a familiar dance. Everyone knew their steps, their place in the morning ritual. Jeremiah accepted his sandwich with a respectful nod. "Thank you, Mama." "Lord, if I could get 2 words out of you, it'd be a miracle," Mama Cass said, but her eyes were fond. "At least Slim here knows how to carry a conversation." "That's 'cause Slim likes to hear himself talk," Jeremiah replied softly, earning a chorus of chuckles from the gathered group. The peaceful morning rhythm faltered as a police cruiser rolled past, moving slower than necessary. The officer inside stared hard at the gathering, his hand visible on the steering wheel. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees despite the fire barrel's warmth. Jeremiah's posture shifted subtly, a change so slight only Slim seemed to notice. His eyes tracked the patrol car until it disappeared around the corner. "Getting bold, aren't they?" Slim muttered, his usual smile fading slightly. "Third time this week, they've done their little drive-by." The group dispersed gradually, returning to their daily routines. Little D lowered his phone, but not before capturing a few more shots of the morning light catching the steam from the fire barrel. Slim pulled out a worn notebook from his jacket pocket, jotting something down with a stubby pencil. The pages were dense with his cramped handwriting, filled with observations and thoughts collected over countless mornings like this one. "You know what we are, Ghost?" Slim asked, looking up from his writing. His voice had taken on that philosophical tone he got sometimes when the morning was quiet and the coffee was hot. "We're the memory keepers, the ones who remember how it was, how it is, how it should be. These streets, they try to forget people like us exist. But we're still here, watching, remembering." He gestured at the city around them, the gleaming office buildings rising above their heads like distant mountains. "We're the only thing standing between concrete and forgetting." Jeremiah took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes fixed on some distant point. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Not anymore. The morning peace shattered like glass when 3 police cruisers screeched around the corner. Their tires crunched over broken bottles as they surrounded the small gathering beneath the overpass. Officer Blake Rourke stepped out first, adjusting his tactical vest with practiced showmanship. "Rise and shine, folks!" Rourke's voice carried false cheer. "City's got big plans for this spot. Time to pack up and disappear." The other officers spread out, hands resting on their weapons. Detective Morales hung back by her car, her face a careful mask of professional detachment. Mama Cass stepped forward, her shopping cart between her and the officers. "Now hold on just a minute. These people ain't causing no trouble. We've been here for years." "Ma'am, step back." Rourke cut her off. "New ordinance says no loitering, no camping, no exceptions." He kicked over an empty coffee cup, sending it skittering across the pavement. Slim's shoulders tensed. "Ordinance? More like organized harassment. Y'all just pushing us around 'cause some developers got deep pockets." Jeremiah placed a steady hand on Slim's arm. "Let it go, brother," he murmured. "Not worth it." But Slim was on a roll, his voice rising. "No, Ghost, I'm tired of this. They think a badge gives them the right to treat us like we ain't human." He pulled out his notebook. "I got dates, times, every incident of police." Rourke moved fast. He crossed the space in 3 quick strides and knocked the notebook from Slim's hand. "You threatening me, old man?" "Just stating facts," Slim replied, bending to retrieve his notebook. Rourke's boot came down on the pages. "I said move along." The tension crackled like electricity. Little D had his phone out, recording everything. Other homeless people backed away, disappearing into shadows and doorways. "Officer, please," Mama Cass tried again. "We'll move. Just give us time to—" Rourke grabbed Slim's collar and slammed him against the concrete wall. The sound echoed under the overpass. "Maybe you didn't hear me. This isn't a negotiation." Jeremiah's body language shifted subtly. His hands remained loose at his sides, but his feet adjusted stance, weight balanced, ready. His eyes tracked every officer's position with cold precision. "Let him go." Jeremiah's voice was quiet, but carried steel. "He's not resisting." Detective Morales finally spoke up. "Rourke, ease off. They're complying." But Rourke was running on adrenaline and authority. He twisted Slim around and threw him to the ground. Slim's head bounced off the pavement with a sickening thud. "Stay down!" Rourke pressed his knee into Slim's back. "Anyone else want to be a hero?" Mama Cass was shouting now, her voice thick with fury and fear. Little D's hands shook as he kept filming. Other officers shifted uncomfortably, but didn't intervene. Jeremiah took 1 step forward. His movement drew every eye, commanded attention without a word. There was something in his stillness that made even Rourke pause. "Get back!" Rourke barked, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Something about the homeless man's stare unsettled him. Slim groaned under Rourke's knee. "Ghost! Don't!" Detective Morales watched the scene unfold, her hand hovering near her radio. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across her face as she wrestled with her conscience. Rourke yanked Slim to his feet, cuffing him roughly. "Clear out! All of you!" He shoved Slim toward a patrol car. "And you!" He jabbed a finger at Jeremiah. "You're next, if you think you're untouchable." Jeremiah's eyes locked onto Rourke. No anger showed on his weathered face, no fear, just a cold, calculating focus that seemed to measure distances, angles, vulnerabilities. His gaze held the weight of experience, of violence, carefully contained. The other officers hustled people away, clearing the area with shoves and threats. Mama Cass's protests echoed off the concrete walls. Little Dee's phone kept recording until an officer blocked his view. Through it all, Jeremiah remained motionless, watching Rourke with that same emotionless stare. His silence spoke volumes, promised something that made even seasoned cops step carefully around him. Detective Morales caught his eye for a moment. Something passed between them. A flash of understanding, perhaps. She looked away first, climbing back into her car as Rourke finished his show of force. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the overpass into a maze of harsh light and deeper shadows. The community scattered, leaving behind overturned cups, scattered belongings, and the lingering echo of authority wielded like a weapon. Behind Jerry's Gas and Go, the evening air hung thick with exhaust fumes and fryer grease from the nearby burger joint. Jeremiah and Slim sat on milk crates in the narrow alley, their shadows long against the brick wall. The day's heat still radiated from the pavement, but neither man seemed to notice the discomfort. Slim pulled out his worn notebook, its pages dog-eared and stained with coffee. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through it, but his voice was steady. "Look at this, Ghost. 3 months of watching them. Dates, times, everything." Jeremiah leaned forward, his eyes scanning the cramped handwriting. Page after page detailed meetings between officers and men in expensive suits. Dollar amounts, license plate numbers, properties marked for urban renewal. "See this?" Slim's finger traced a line of text. "Officer Rourke meets with some suit named Davidson every Tuesday morning at that fancy coffee place downtown. Always carries out a brown paper bag." He flipped to another page. "And here, 3 families forced out of their homes last month. Same day, Davidson's company files permits for new construction." Jeremiah's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't chase the fire, Slim. You're playing with something dangerous." "That's exactly why I gotta do it." Slim straightened up, wincing at the creak in his back. "Somebody's got to stand up. Show them we see what they're doing." A truck rumbled past on the street, its headlights briefly illuminating their faces. Jeremiah's features were carved from shadow, while Slim's eyes burned with purpose. "They're systematically clearing us out," Slim continued, his voice low but intense. "Not just the homeless. Working families, too. Anyone who can't fight back. And the cops? They're just hired muscle with badges." Jeremiah watched a rat scurry along the base of the wall, disappearing behind a dumpster. "Justice doesn't always wear a clean face, brother." "Maybe not." Slim closed the notebook carefully. "But somebody's got to write it down. Make a record. Show that we existed here, that we mattered." The sound of breaking glass echoed from somewhere nearby, followed by distant laughter. Jeremiah's jaw clenched, a tiny tell that most would miss. But Slim knew him too well. "You're worried about me," Slim said, a slight smile crossing his weathered face. The quiet ghost, always watching out for others. From his backpack, Slim produced 2 wrapped sandwiches, day-old donations from the deli around the corner. He handed one to Jeremiah. the paper crinkling in the growing darkness. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of shared hardship and understanding. Sirens wailed in the distance, but neither man reacted. Such sounds were just part of their urban lullaby. Slim brushed crumbs from his jacket, his movements deliberate. You know what Mama Cass always says? Truth's got a way of finding daylight. He patted the notebook in his pocket. Maybe that's all I'm doing, helping the truth along a little. Jeremiah finished his sandwich, carefully folding the wrapper into a tight square. His hands, despite their roughness, moved with precise control. Above them, between the towering buildings, a few stars managed to pierce the city's glow. Slim followed Jeremiah's gaze upward, both men taking in the vast darkness above their small corner of existence. If I die, Slim said quietly, make sure it means something. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Jeremiah didn't respond, didn't turn to meet his friend's eyes. He just kept looking up at those distant points of light, his face unreadable in the growing darkness. Around them, the city continued its endless rhythm. Cars passed on nearby streets. Music thumped from a distant club. The smell of garbage and gasoline mixed with the sweetness of magnolia trees that somehow survived in the concrete jungle. The moment stretched, filled with all the things they'd seen together, all the winters huddled under bridges, all the mornings sharing cold coffee and stale bread. Two men, invisible to most of the world, carrying their own kind of truth. Slim's notebook pressed against his chest, a testament to his determination. Jeremiah's silence spoke volumes, carrying the weight of experience and knowledge he never shared. They sat together in the growing night, two shadows among many, watching the stars fight through the city's glare. Dawn crept over Memphis like a tired ghost, painting the buildings in pale gray light. The air was already thick with humidity, promising another scorching summer day. Behind Jerry's Gas and Go, where the concrete met brick walls covered in faded graffiti, Slim stretched his aging bones. Jeremiah lay curled under a tattered blanket nearby, his breathing steady and deep. For once, his face looked peaceful in sleep, free from the constant alertness that marked his waking hours. Slim watched his friend for a moment, smiling slightly at how, even in sleep, Jeremiah's body remained coiled like a spring. Rest easy, Ghost, Slim whispered, patting the notebook in his jacket pocket. The morning routine called. The public restroom at the park was usually empty this early, offering a chance to wash up before the day truly began. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional delivery truck and early commuters. Slim walked with purpose, his gait steady despite years of sleeping on hard ground. The park's restroom building came into view, its concrete walls tagged with fresh spray paint. As he approached the building's corner, Officer Rourke stepped out from behind a patrol car, blocking his path. The morning light caught his badge, sending sharp reflections into Slim's eyes. Well, if it isn't the neighborhood historian. Rourke's voice dripped with mock friendliness. Taking notes about anything interesting lately? Slim's shoulders tensed, but he kept his voice level. Just heading to the bathroom, officer. Nothing illegal about that. You sure about that? Rourke moved closer, his hand resting casually on his belt. Because I heard you've been writing stories, making up lies about good police officers. Truth ain't a lie just because you don't like it. Slim stood his ground, though his heart hammered in his chest. And watching ain't a crime. Rourke's fake smile vanished. You got a big mouth for a bum. Maybe it's time somebody taught you about respect. Respect? Slim couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. You wouldn't know respect if it wore a uniform. I served this country while you were still in diapers. You served? Rourke sneered, closing the distance between them. Look at you now. Nothing but trash polluting my streets. Your streets? Slim's voice rose slightly. "These streets belong to everybody, even those of us you're trying to push out for your developer friends." Rourke's face darkened. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." Slim's hand unconsciously touched the notebook in his pocket. "Tuesday morning meetings. Brown paper bags. Davidson Real Estate. Ring any bells?" The officer's expression shifted from anger to something colder. "Empty your pockets, now." "No." Slim took a step back. "I know my rights. You got no cause. I said empty them." Rourke's hand moved to his weapon. "What you gonna do? Shoot an unarmed man in broad daylight?" Slim kept his hands visible, spread wide. "That what they teach you in the academy now?" A car door slammed nearby. Detective Morales emerged from her unmarked vehicle, coffee in hand, taking in the scene with growing concern. "Everything okay here?" she called out, walking briskly toward them. "Stay back, detective," Rourke barked. "This suspect is resisting." "Resisting what?" Slim's voice was steady, but his eyes darted between the officers. "Standing while black? Existing in public?" "Last warning," Rourke growled. "On your knees." "I did that enough in Vietnam," Slim said quietly. "Not doing it for you." The sound of the gunshot echoed off the buildings. Slim staggered backward, surprise more than pain registering on his face. His hand went to his chest, coming away red. "Gun!" Rourke shouted, though there was nothing in Slim's hands but blood. "No!" Morales screamed, drawing her weapon. "Stand down!" Slim stumbled into the alley, leaving a trail of red droplets on the concrete. His legs gave out near a stack of wooden pallets. The notebook fell from his pocket, landing in a puddle. Morales reached him first, pressing her hands against the wound. "Stay with me! Stay with me!" she urged. But Slim's eyes were already growing distant. "Tell Ghost," he whispered. But the rest was lost in a wet cough. Footsteps approached, quick, precise steps that both officers recognized. Jeremiah appeared at the alley's entrance, his presence somehow filling the narrow space. His eyes took in everything. Slim's crumpled form, the blood, Rourke's still smoking weapon. Without a word, he moved past the officers and knelt beside his friend. Slim's eyes found his, a final message passing between them. Then the light faded, and Slim was gone. Morales reached for her radio with shaking hands. Rourke started shouting something about procedure and threats. But when they looked back at Slim's body, Jeremiah had vanished as completely as morning mist in sunlight. The alley held only echoes of a gunshot, of injustice, of a friendship severed by violence. And somewhere in the city's shadows, a ghost began to move. Yellow police tape fluttered in the morning breeze, marking off the alley like a grotesque party decoration. Red and blue lights painted the brick walls as more patrol cars arrived, their sirens cutting through the heavy Memphis air. Officers moved with practiced efficiency, setting up a perimeter while crime scene techs unpacked their equipment. Detective Morales stood rigid, her coffee cup forgotten on the ground, its contents mixing with the growing puddle of blood. Her hands, still stained red despite the paper towels another officer had given her, shook slightly as she faced Rourke. "He was unarmed," she hissed, keeping her voice low but intense. "There was no weapon, no threat. What were you thinking?" Rourke's face remained smug, though a thin sheen of sweat betrayed his nerves. He reached for something. "I perceived a threat and acted according to protocol. It's all in my statement." "Your statement?" Morales stepped closer, her voice dropping even lower. "Your statement is garbage, and you know it. I was right there." "Then you saw him resist," Rourke shot back. "Besides, these people are unpredictable. Better safe than sorry." "These people?" Morales's hands balled into fists. He was a veteran, a human being. Before Rourke could respond, a heart-wrenching wail cut through the morning air. Mama Cass pushed through the growing crowd of onlookers, her substantial frame moving with surprising speed. Two young officers tried to stop her at the tape, but she brushed past them like they were children. "My boy!" she cried, dropping to her knees beside Slim's body, which lay waiting for the medical examiner. "Oh Lord, my sweet boy." Little D circled the scene's edges, his cracked iPhone held high despite his trembling hands. His face was wet with tears, but his grip remained steady as he captured everything. The blood, the officers, Mama Cass's grief. The live stream counter in the corner of his screen kept climbing. "They killed him," Little D narrated, his voice thick with emotion. "They killed Slim in cold blood. Y'all watching this? The whole world needs to see." Officers started noticing the recording, moving to block his view. But Little D was quick, ducking and weaving, making sure his lens caught every detail. The footage might be shaky, but it was clear enough to tell the truth. "Where's Ghost?" someone in the crowd whispered. The question rippled through the gathering observers. "Where's Jeremiah?" Mama Cass looked up from her prayers, suddenly alert. Her eyes scanned the crowd, the alley, the rooftops, but there was no sign of the quiet man who had been Slim's constant companion. "He wouldn't leave," she said firmly, though doubt crept into her voice. He wouldn't just, but he had. As police canvassed the area and witnesses gave statements, it became clear that Jeremiah "Ghost" Booker had completely vanished. Their usual spots, the loading dock behind Jerry's, the warm vent near the library, the sheltered corner of the park, all stood empty. "Probably scared," Rourke commented loudly to another officer. "These street people always run when things get real." Morales watched the search with growing unease. Something about Jeremiah's disappearance felt wrong. Not like running, but like preparation. Across town, in an abandoned warehouse that had once housed farm equipment, dust motes danced in thin beams of light filtering through broken windows. The space was vast, empty except for scattered debris and the skeletal remains of old machinery. Jeremiah moved through the shadows with fluid grace, his footsteps silent on the concrete floor. He approached a specific section of wall, counting bricks up from the floor with practiced precision. His fingers found the loose mortar, and with careful pressure, a small section of wall swung inward. Behind the false brick lay a rusted metal trunk, its surface scarred but solid. Jeremiah pulled it out slowly, reverently. The combination lock yielded to his touch. He'd never forgotten the numbers, though it had been years since he'd needed them. The lid creaked open, releasing the smell of oil and old leather. Inside, wrapped in protective cloth, lay the pieces of a past he'd tried to leave behind. His hands moved over each item with familiar respect. A military-grade combat knife, its edge still razor-sharp. Detailed maps of the city, marked with notes in precise handwriting. A thick notebook filled with tactical observations and diagrams. At the bottom, partially tangled in a chain, lay his dog tags. He lifted them carefully, the metal cool against his palm. His thumb brushed across the embossed letters, pausing on one word that meant everything. Delta. The morning light caught the tags, making them gleam like promises or warnings. The neon sign of O'Malley's bar buzzed and flickered, casting sickly purple shadows across Officer Blake Rourke's face as he held court at the corner of the bar. Empty shot glasses lined up in front of him like tiny soldiers, each one marking another round of his increasingly loud storytelling. "So, this bum, right?" Rourke's voice carried over the tired country music playing from ancient speakers. He starts mouthing off, acting like he's somebody. He paused to take another drink, relishing his audience of off-duty cops. Talking about rights and stuff. Can you believe that? The other officers chuckled, their badges tucked away but their attitudes still on full display. The regular customers had moved to the far end of the bar, leaving a bubble of empty space around the drunk cops. "Then what happened?" asked a rookie officer, eager to please. Rourke's grin turned ugly. "Well, he made a sudden move. You know how it goes. Had to protect myself." He mimed drawing his weapon. Problem solved. One less piece of trash on our streets. The bartender, an older woman with tired eyes, deliberately turned up the music. Rourke didn't notice or care. Best part? He leaned in conspiratorially. His crazy friend, the quiet one, disappeared like smoke. Probably halfway to Mississippi by now. Another shot disappeared down his throat. That's how these people are. No loyalty, no spine. They just scatter like roaches when the lights come on. Outside, the Memphis night had turned sticky with approaching rain. The parking lot behind O'Malley's was poorly lit, with just one flickering lamp casting weak light over the officers' personal vehicles. Rourke's prized Dodge Charger sat in what he considered his personal spot, its black paint still gleaming despite the darkness. Hours passed. The bar slowly emptied. By midnight, even Rourke had to admit it was time to head home. He stumbled through the back door, fumbling with his keys. The first thing he noticed was wrong was the smell, a sharp, chemical odor that cut through his alcohol haze. The second was a small piece of paper tucked under his windshield wiper, fluttering in the humid breeze. Rourke grabbed the note, squinting at the precise handwriting in the dim light. Just 2 words. "I saw." His drunk brain took too long to process the meaning. By the time fear started to creep in, he'd already pressed the key fob to unlock his car. The explosion wasn't massive. It wasn't meant to kill. But it was perfectly calculated to destroy the vehicle while leaving the surrounding area untouched. The force knocked Rourke backward onto the asphalt as his precious Charger erupted in a controlled ball of flame. The heat hit him in waves as he scrambled backward, suddenly very sober. Alarms began wailing in nearby buildings. Inside the bar, people rushed to the windows. When the fire department arrived 20 minutes later, they found something odd about the explosion. It was contained, professional. The car was a total loss, but there wasn't even scorch marks on the surrounding pavement. "Never seen anything like it," one firefighter muttered to another. "Almost like it was engineered to send a message." Rourke stood trembling as he gave his statement. His earlier bravado evaporated like morning dew. He kept the note crumpled in his fist, not mentioning it to anyone. His eyes darted between shadows, searching for... What? Who? Miles away, in a basement beneath an abandoned church, a single battery-powered lamp cast weak light over careful hands. Jeremiah moved with practiced efficiency as he disassembled a custom rifle, each piece being cleaned and checked before disappearing into a padded case. The basement was sparse but organized. Maps covered one wall, filled with precise markings and calculations. A police scanner hummed quietly in the corner, its LED display providing the only other light. On a small folding table lay 2 items: Slim's journal, its pages dog-eared and marked with colored tabs, and an old photograph. The picture showed a group of men in desert camo, their faces young and serious. Most of the names had been carefully blacked out, leaving only 2 visible: Ghost and Anderson. Jeremiah's movements never faltered as he worked. Each piece of the rifle found its place with smooth precision. His face remained impassive, but his eyes held the cold focus of a man who had rediscovered an old, dangerous skill set. The scanner crackled with reports of the explosion. Jeremiah didn't react. His hands kept moving, steady and sure, as if they had never stopped doing this work, as if the years of invisible homelessness had just been a pause between missions. A single drop of gun oil fell onto the concrete floor. In the weak lamplight, it looked almost like blood. Officer Mike Dennison's head pounded as consciousness slowly returned. The first thing he noticed was the cold, metal against his back, seeping through his thin uniform shirt. The second was that he couldn't move his arms or legs. His eyes fluttered open to absolute darkness. The air smelled stale, like old concrete and rust. When he tried to call out, he realized there was duct tape across his mouth. Somewhere in the blackness, a voice spoke. Soft. Controlled. You helped Rourke clear the homeless from Carter Street last month. 23 people lost everything they owned. Dennison's breath quickened. He strained against the zip ties binding his wrists and ankles, but they only cut deeper into his skin. One of them was a woman, 78 years old. You pepper-sprayed her when she wouldn't leave her cart fast enough. A small LED flashlight clicked on, casting harsh shadows. Dennison couldn't see the man holding it. The beam pointed directly at his face, leaving everything else in darkness. Her name was Ruth Martinez. She died from complications 3 days later. The voice never raised above a conversational tone. That made it worse somehow. I'm going to remove the tape now. If you scream, this gets much worse. Nod if you understand. Dennison nodded frantically. The tape came off in one swift motion. Please, he whispered. I was just following orders. Like when you helped plant evidence on Marcus Thompson, or when you watched Rourke shoot an unarmed man. The questions came steady, relentless. Each one accompanied by precise pain, nerve strikes, and pressure points that Dennison didn't even know existed. Professional, clinical, nothing that would leave permanent damage, but enough to ensure every answer was honest. Hours passed in that metal box. By the end, Dennison had confessed to everything: the bribes, the cover-ups, the systematic harassment of the homeless to clear valuable real estate. His voice was hoarse from talking, from crying. The LED light never wavered. Last question, the voice said. The developer's name. The one paying Rourke. Hamilton, Dennison gasped. James Hamilton. Downtown Properties, LLC. The light clicked off. Footsteps moved away, then stopped. Someone will find you in a few hours. Remember this feeling. Remember that we see everything. Then silence. When the storage facility's morning shift manager arrived at 6 a.m., she found Unit 247's lock cut and door partially open. Inside, Officer Dennison sat propped against the wall, conscious but shaking. The zip ties had been removed. No blood, no serious injuries, just bruises and terror in his eyes. CSI teams swarmed the unit within the hour. They found nothing. No fingerprints, no fibers, no DNA. The security cameras had gone dark for exactly 4 hours during the night. A system glitch, according to the confused IT contractor. Detective Morales stood in the storage unit, notepad in hand, watching the forensics team work. Something about the scene bothered her. It was too clean, too precise. This wasn't random violence or gang retaliation. This was methodical. Detective? An officer called from outside. We found this in his pocket. He handed her a small card. One side blank, the other bearing a single typed line. Ask him about Ruth Martinez. Morales drove home that evening with questions churning in her mind. The case felt wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. Dennison refused to talk about his attacker, but he'd immediately requested a transfer out of Rourke's unit. His hands shook when they mentioned the homeless encampments. She pulled into her driveway just as the sun was setting. The day's mail sat in her box, bills, junk, and a small padded envelope with no return address. Inside her house, Morales examined the envelope carefully before opening it. A flash drive fell into her palm, unmarked except for a small piece of tape with "Truth" written in precise block letters. Her laptop whirred to life. The drive contained a single audio file dated 3 weeks ago. She pressed play. Voices filled her office. She recognized them immediately. Rourke, Dennison, and Captain Hayes. They were discussing payment schedules, property values, and cleanup operations. One exchange made her blood run cold. That old guy, the one who hangs around the construction site, he heard everything. Slim, don't worry about him. Nobody listens to street people. If he becomes a problem, we'll handle it. Laughter. The sound of clinking glasses. Morales sat back, her coffee growing cold beside her. The recording was clear, damning, and completely inadmissible in court. But it confirmed what she'd suspected since Slim's death. This wasn't about a homeless man making sudden movements. This was an execution. She ejected the drive and locked it in her desk drawer. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one, pushing back the gathering darkness. Officer Blake Rourke jolted awake at 3 a.m. to the piercing shriek of his home security system. He fumbled for his gun on the nightstand, heart hammering against his ribs. The alarm stopped as suddenly as it started, leaving only the quiet hum of his ceiling fan. Nothing was disturbed. No broken windows. No forced doors. Just the lingering echo of fear in his chest. This was the third night this week. His hands shook as he poured himself a drink, amber liquid splashing over the rim. The house felt different now. Every shadow held threats. Every creak made him jump. Sleep came in short, restless bursts. At dawn, he found the first mark. A precise chalk symbol on his front door, the kind military units used for urban warfare. He scrubbed it off before anyone could see, but his eyes kept darting to that spot all day. The next night, smoke seeped under his bedroom door at midnight. Not fire smoke. Tactical, military grade. The kind that moves like water and leaves no trace. By the time he grabbed his mask and cleared the house, it had vanished completely. "Someone's messing with you," his partner said over coffee. Probably those street punks getting revenge for the old man. Rourke didn't answer. Street punks didn't use military tactics. Street punks didn't know how to bypass security systems or deploy specialized smoke. This was something else. Someone else. He started taking different routes to work, varying his schedule, checking his car for devices. The paranoia ate at him. Dark circles formed under his eyes. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. More chalk marks appeared. On his car, his garage, even the sidewalk outside his favorite bar. Each one a different military symbol. Each one scrubbed away before anyone else could notice. But he knew they were there. He knew what they meant. You're being hunted. The night everything changed, Rourke was doing a solo patrol near the industrial district. The streets were empty. Streetlights casting long shadows across cracked pavement. His radio crackled with routine chatter. He never saw the road spikes. The cruiser's tires blew simultaneously, a precise deployment that sent the vehicle spinning but controlled enough to prevent a fatal crash. Before he could radio for help, something hit the driver's side window. The glass spiderwebbed but held. Another impact. The window shattered inward. Something hissed through the opening, more tactical smoke, filling the car's interior in seconds. Rourke reached for his gun, but his arms felt heavy. The world tilted sideways. When awareness returned, he couldn't move. Heavy-duty zip ties bound his wrists to the steering wheel. The smoke had cleared, but his head still swam. Outside, a figure moved in the darkness. Just a shadow, really. Silent, deliberate. Military precision in every step. "Help!" Rourke tried to shout, but his voice came out weak. "Officer down!" The radio lay silent, disabled somehow. His phone was gone from its holder. Even his backup weapon had vanished from his ankle holster. The shadow circled the car slowly, methodically. Rourke strained to see a face, any identifying feature, but there was only darkness where features should be. A soft click made him freeze, the sound of a spray can being shaken. White paint appeared on his windshield, each letter precise despite the awkward angle. The message emerged in stark capitals. For Slim. Please, Rourke whispered to the darkness. What do you want? No answer came. The shadow moved away, melting into the night like it had never existed. Only the faint hiss of paint lingered in the air. Rourke sat there, bound and helpless, watching the paint drip down his windshield. Each drop felt like a countdown, but to what? He didn't know. Backup found him an hour later, after his failure to respond to radio checks. They cut him free, documented the scene, launched a search that would find nothing. No fingerprints, no traces, just military-grade zip ties and that stark message bleeding down the glass. In his report, Rourke described a random attack. Multiple assailants, he claimed, gang members probably. But he knew the truth. One shadow, one hunter, one message. The next morning, he requested vacation time. Stress leave, he told the captain. But as he drove home, a new chalk mark waited on his garage door. Fresh, precise. The hunter wasn't finished. This was just the beginning. Tamika Dillard's phone buzzed at 3 a.m. in her Atlanta apartment. Another notification. She'd been getting them all night. Shares, comments, tags in posts about a homeless man shot by police in Memphis. Her thumb hesitated over the screen before opening the latest link. The shaky video showed a familiar face. Even through the grainy footage, she knew those eyes, that gentle smile. Her father. No, she whispered, scrolling frantically through the comments. No, no, no. Words jumped out at her. Murdered. Unarmed. Police brutality. Her father's street name, Slim, appeared again and again. The coffee shop where she worked morning shifts felt a million miles away now. 6 hours later, her car crossed the Tennessee state line. The Memphis skyline rose ahead, a place she'd sworn never to return to. Not after her father chose the streets over treatment, over family, over her. But here she was, hands tight on the steering wheel, throat raw from crying. She found Mama Cass exactly where the locals said she'd be, under the viaduct, handing out sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. The old woman's eyes lit up with recognition. Lord have mercy, Mama Cass said, pulling Tamika into a bone-crushing hug. You look just like your daddy's pictures. Pictures? He kept them in his journal, showed them to me sometimes when the pride got too heavy to carry alone. Cass's voice cracked. He loved you something fierce, baby girl. Tamika's chest tightened. I haven't spoken to him in 3 years. But he spoke about you every day. His nurse daughter. His pride and joy. Detective Morales found them there, still talking, still crying. The detective's badge glinted in the afternoon sun as she approached cautiously. Ms. Dillard? Morales's voice was soft but firm. I need to show you something. They moved to Mama Cass's van, parked in the shade. Morales pulled out a laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. This isn't official evidence. It came to me anonymously. The audio crackled to life. Male voices, casual, laughing about bribes and development deals. Then her father's name. Plans to handle the situation before he could talk. They killed him, Tamika whispered. They actually killed him. The official report says he reached for a weapon, Morales said. But no weapon was ever found. Tamika's hands clenched into fists. Years of buried guilt and anger boiled over. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. What are you doing? Mama Cass asked. Making sure everyone knows. Tamika opened her camera app. Making sure they can't hide this. The video she recorded was raw, unfiltered. No makeup, no script. Just a daughter's pain and fury laid bare for the world to see. She spoke about her father, not just as a homeless man, but as a veteran, a philosopher, a man who loved blues music and collected interesting rocks. The city wants you to see a stereotype, she said, tears streaming down her face. "They want you to see someone disposable. But I see my father. I see a man who wrote me letters every week, even when I stopped reading them, who kept my nursing school graduation photo in his jacket, who died because he saw something wrong and wouldn't stay quiet." She uploaded the video right there, hands still trembling. Within hours, it exploded. Local news picked it up first, then national. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "They can't ignore this now," Morales said quietly. "Too many people are watching." High above them, perched on the edge of an abandoned warehouse roof, Jeremiah watched through tactical binoculars. His weathered face remained impassive as Tamika's voice carried up to him through the evening air. "I don't want vengeance," she declared to another news crew that had rushed to the scene. "I want truth. I want the whole system exposed. I want everyone to see what they did to my father." Jeremiah's eyes narrowed behind the binoculars. The knife at his hip felt heavier. The chalk marks and smoke bombs suddenly seemed inadequate. Slim's daughter wanted truth, but truth without consequences was just noise. His fingers traced the outline of Slim's journal in his pocket. Pages full of names, dates, corruption laid bare in careful handwriting. Truth was coming, but so was justice. Tamika's voice rose again from below. "They thought nobody would care about one homeless man. They were wrong." Jeremiah lowered the binoculars. She wanted truth. He wanted both. The City Records building stood dark against the midnight sky, its windows reflecting the sparse streetlights. Jeremiah moved like a shadow across the parking lot, his years of Delta Force training evident in every silent step. His ragged clothes concealed tactical gear underneath. Not military grade anymore, but good enough for tonight's mission. He'd spent 3 days watching the building's patterns. Security guards made rounds every 30 minutes. Cameras had blind spots he'd mapped out. The night cleaning crew left at 11 p.m. It was now 1:17 a.m., the quietest hour. The service entrance lock took 12 seconds to pick. Jeremiah counted each one in his head, the way he'd been trained. The door opened without a sound. Inside, emergency lights cast a dim green glow through empty hallways. A guard's footsteps echoed from around the corner. Jeremiah pressed himself against the wall, becoming one with the shadows. The guard passed within inches, never looking up from his phone. Amateur. In Somalia, that kind of carelessness got people killed. The records room was on the 3rd floor. Jeremiah took the stairs, avoiding the cameras he knew monitored the elevators. His worn boots made no sound on the concrete steps. The stairwell door opened to a long corridor lined with filing cabinets and office doors. A security camera swept back and forth at the far end. Jeremiah timed its movement, then moved quickly between its arcs. The records room door had a keycard reader. He pulled out a small device, something he'd kept from his military days. The light turned green. Inside, rows of computers hummed softly. Jeremiah moved to the terminal he'd identified during his reconnaissance, the one connected to the Development Division's secure server. A flash drive appeared in his hand, loaded with programs designed to bypass government firewalls. The screen lit up with folders. His fingers moved quickly, finding what he needed: construction permits, developer agreements, police overtime logs, money trails leading straight to the top. A soft click behind him. Another guard, earlier than expected. Jeremiah didn't turn around. He waited, listening to the approaching footsteps. 3 steps closer. 2. 1. His hand shot out, catching the guard's wrist before the radio could reach his mouth. A precise strike to the throat cut off any sound. The guard slumped unconsciously to the floor, zip-tied and gagged before he fully lost consciousness. No permanent damage. No evidence. Jeremiah returned to the computer. The files were copying. Each document showed the same pattern. inflated police presence requested by developers, massive overtime payments, homeless populations mysteriously relocated before major projects broke ground. He sent everything to 2 email addresses. Detective Morales would know what to do with it. The journalist, a woman known for exposing police corruption, would make sure it couldn't be buried. But digital files weren't enough. Jeremiah reached into his jacket and pulled out Slim's journal. The pages were worn, filled with careful observations and damning details. Slim had seen it all, documented everything. His last act of resistance. The police chief's office was 1 floor up. The doorplate read, Chief Michael Harrison, in gold letters. Another picked lock. Another silent entry. Jeremiah placed the journal carefully on the chief's desk. The page he left it open to was marked with a single red line. Slim's way of highlighting the most important information. The final entry, written the day before his death, heard Harrison himself today. Talking with that developer Rourke works for. Said they'd handle anyone who made noise about the missing money. $2.3 million in security contracts that don't exist. They're killing people over empty lots and pocket change. Someone needs to know. Someone needs to care. Jeremiah's hand lingered on the journal, his last connection to his friend. But Slim had always said truth needed witnesses. Now he'd have thousands. A noise in the hallway. Jeremiah melted into the shadows behind a filing cabinet. 2 janitors passed by, arguing about a basketball game. He waited until their voices faded. The office window offered a clear view of the street below. 3 stories up, but the drainage pipe was sturdy enough. Jeremiah checked his watch. 4 minutes until the next guard rotation. He slipped out the window and descended with practiced ease, each movement precise and controlled. His boots touched the pavement just as a patrol car rolled past the building's front entrance. Jeremiah walked away calmly. Just another homeless man in the shadows. Behind him, the evidence sat waiting. By morning, everyone would know. The chief would find the journal. Morales would have the files. The journalist would start asking questions. Slim's voice echoed in his memory. Truth needs witnesses. Now it would have an army of them. The morning news hit like a bomb. Every major network carried the story. Massive police corruption exposed in Memphis. The journalist, Sarah Chen, had done her job well. Her article laid out everything: the bribes, the fake contracts, the targeted harassment of homeless residents. Most damning were the financial records showing millions flowing between developers and police pension funds. Phones started ringing at dawn. The mayor's office was swamped. Police headquarters had to shut down their switchboard. Social media exploded with clips from Little D's footage of Slim's shooting, now paired with documents proving it wasn't random violence, but calculated elimination. Downtown, crowds gathered spontaneously. Mama Cass stood on the steps of City Hall, her voice carrying over the growing mass of angry citizens. They killed my boy for money. They killed Slim because he saw their dirty deals. Tamika Dillard spoke next, holding up her father's published journal entries. Her hands shook, but her voice was steel. My father died trying to expose this. He wasn't just homeless. He was a witness. They murdered him for telling the truth. Inside police headquarters, Officer Blake Rourke sat in an empty break room, watching the coverage on a small TV. His face had gone pale. The chief had already been arrested. Internal Affairs was going through personnel files. His phone buzzed. Another text from his lawyer telling him to say nothing. Detective Morales strode into the precinct, badge restored and eyes blazing. Officers moved out of her way. She'd been officially reinstated an hour ago. Her suspension lifted after the corruption evidence vindicated her earlier complaints. Camera crews swarmed as she stepped up to the podium outside. As a detective with Memphis PD, I am formally requesting criminal charges against all officers involved in the death of Reggie Dillard and the subsequent cover-up. This department betrayed the public trust. We will clean house." The crowds cheered. More people poured into downtown. Protest signs appeared. Chants echoed off buildings. "Justice for Slim." "Jail killer cops!" Rourke slipped out the back door of the precinct, keeping his head down. His hands trembled as he fumbled with his car keys. Everything was falling apart. His phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unknown number. "I see you running." He floored it out of the parking lot, tires squealing. In his rearview mirror, he could see more protesters arriving, their signs demanding his arrest. His breath came in short gasps. He had to get out of town, had to disappear before they came for him. At a red light, he checked his bank accounts on his phone. His assets were frozen. Of course they were. He pulled into a gas station, hands shaking as he filled up his tank. The TV behind the counter showed his official photo, along with the words, "Wanted for questioning." Back on the road, Rourke headed for the interstate. His sister had a place in Atlanta. He could lay low there, figure things out. The radio crackled with updates about the investigation. He switched it off, pressing harder on the gas. A dark figure on a motorcycle appeared in his mirror, staying a few cars back. Rourke's heart pounded. He changed lanes erratically, trying to lose the tail. The motorcycle matched his movements smoothly, professionally. He took the next exit, then another, weaving through side streets. The motorcycle followed. Rourke's hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. He recognized the riding style, military precision, maintaining perfect distance. When he looked in the mirror again, the motorcycle was gone. Rourke let out a shaky breath. Maybe he was just paranoid. Maybe. The same motorcycle appeared ahead of him, waiting at an intersection. The rider's helmet turned slowly to track his car as he passed. In the mirror, it pulled out to follow again. Rourke's phone buzzed. Another unknown number. You can't outrun a ghost. Back downtown, the protests had swelled to fill multiple blocks. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting aerial shots of the crowds. Detective Morales stood with Tamika and Mama Cass, watching the coverage on a storefront TV. "He's running," Morales said quietly. Mama Cass nodded. "Won't get far." Some things you can't escape. Tamika wiped tears from her eyes as she watched another replay of her father's story. "I just want to know who's been helping expose all this. The files, the evidence. Someone's been working behind the scenes." "Sometimes justice needs shadows," Mama Cass said, her eyes distant. "Sometimes the light comes from the darkest places." On the interstate heading south, Rourke's car sped through the gathering dusk. The motorcycle followed, patient and relentless as death itself. In the growing darkness, Jeremiah's eyes never left his target. Slim's voice echoed in his memory. "Make it mean something." The hunt was on. The morning sun blazed over Memphis as thousands filled the streets. Signs bobbed above the crowd like angry waves. Justice for Slim. End police violence. Homeless lives matter. The air crackled with purpose and righteous anger. Mama Cass stood at the front, her gray hair gleaming in the sunlight. Her weathered hands gripped a wide banner that read, "We remember Slim," in bold red letters. Her voice, strong despite her age, called out through a borrowed megaphone. "They thought we wouldn't fight back," she shouted. "They thought we'd stay quiet while they killed our brothers and sisters." The crowd roared in response. Little D moved through the masses with his phone held high, live streaming everything. His cracked screen captured the raw energy of the moment, faces filled with determination, fists raised in solidarity, tears streaming down cheeks. "We're at 30,000 viewers," he called out to Mama Cass. "The whole country's watching now." Detective Morales stood to the side, still in her official capacity, but clearly supportive. She spoke quietly into her radio, coordinating with other officers to keep the protest route clear and safe. Her eyes constantly scanned the crowd, watching for trouble but finding only passion and peace. Near the steps of City Hall, Tamika Dillard took the megaphone. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a worn envelope. The crowd hushed, sensing the weight of the moment. "I found this in my father's journal," she said, her voice breaking. "It's addressed to me. I want to share it with you all." Little Dee zoomed in on her face as she began to read. "Dear Tamika, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. Not gone like before, when I chose the streets over stability. Really gone. I need you to understand why I stayed out here when I could have come home. These streets hold secrets. Dark ones. I've been watching the deals made in shadows, the money changing hands, the way they push us around like we're nothing but trash to be swept away. I've written it all down. I know you were ashamed of me. I know it hurt when your friends found out your daddy was homeless. But baby girl, I stayed because somebody had to witness. Somebody had to keep track. Somebody had to stand guard. You're a nurse now. You heal people. I'm so proud of that. I've been trying to heal things too, in my own way, by exposing the sickness in this system. If something happens to me, don't let them bury the truth with my body. Don't let them paint me as just another homeless casualty. I lived with purpose. I died for a reason. I love you more than you'll ever know." Tamika's voice broke on the last words. The crowd had gone completely silent. Then someone started clapping. The sound spread like fire, building to a thunderous roar. Little Dee's live stream comments exploded. News vans pushed closer, their cameras focused on Tamika's tear-streaked face. Mama Cass wrapped her in a tight hug as the applause continued. Detective Morales felt her phone buzz. A text from an unknown number. Check the construction site where they first started the sweeps. Under the foundation. You'll find what Slim saw that night. She texted back, "Who is this?" The response came quickly. "You'll find him in the place he buried the truth." Morales looked up at the crowd, searching for a familiar face, but found only the sea of protesters. The phone buzzed one final time. "Thank you for doing what's right." The protest continued to grow. More people poured in from side streets, drawn by Little Dee's viral live stream and the local news coverage. Signs waved in the morning breeze. Voices joined together in chants for justice. Mama Cass led them in a prayer, her strong voice carrying over the masses. "Lord, we thank you for bringing Slim's truth to light. We thank you for giving us strength to stand up. We thank you for showing us that even the smallest among us can shake the foundations of power." Little Dee's phone battery was running low, but he kept filming. This was history. This was what Slim died for. This was the moment when the voiceless found their chorus. The summer sun climbed higher, beating down on the gathered thousands. But nobody moved to leave. They had waited too long for this day. They had earned this moment of solidarity and strength. Tamika folded her father's letter carefully, tucking it close to her heart. Her voice was stronger now as she took the megaphone again. "My father believed in justice. He believed in truth. He believed that if enough people stood together, even the most powerful would have to listen." The crowd's response shook the windows of City Hall. The truth had finally broken free. And somewhere in the shadows, justice was still being served. The abandoned lot sat like an open wound on the city's edge, ringed by rusted chain-link fence and scattered with construction debris. The setting sun painted everything in shades of blood orange. A lone car pulled up, tires crunching on broken concrete. Officer Blake Rourke stepped out, his movements jerky with fear. His usually pristine uniform was wrinkled, his face unshaven. Dark circles under his eyes showed days without sleep. He kept looking over his shoulder, jumping at shadows. "I know you're here," he called out, voice cracking. "Let's finish this." The lot remained silent except for the distant hum of traffic. Wind rustled through weeds growing between concrete slabs. Rourke drew his service weapon, holding it with trembling hands. A figure emerged from behind a stack of weathered pallets. Jeremiah moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step precise and measured. His ragged clothes couldn't hide the deadly purpose in his stance. His eyes were cold, focused, showing no trace of the quiet, homeless man Rourke had dismissed so easily before. "You should have left Slim alone," Jeremiah said softly. His voice carried clearly across the lot. Rourke aimed his gun. "Stay back." "I'll shoot." "Like you shot an unarmed man?" Jeremiah kept moving forward. "Like you've been shooting at shadows for days now?" "I'm warning you." Jeremiah's movement was a blur. Before Rourke could squeeze the trigger, his gun hand was trapped in an iron grip. A precise strike to his elbow sent waves of pain up his arm. The weapon clattered to the ground. Rourke swung with his free hand. Jeremiah slipped the punch like smoke, countering with a knee to the stomach that drove the air from Rourke's lungs. The officer staggered back, gasping. "What? What are you?" "Someone who's seen real combat," Jeremiah said. "Not just bullied, helpless people." Rourke charged with a roar, throwing wild punches. Jeremiah deflected each one, moving with the fluid efficiency of decades of training. Every counterstrike found a vulnerable point: ribs, kidney, solar plexus. The fight was brutally one-sided. "Please," Rourke wheezed, blood trickling from his nose. "I have money." "Slim had a life." Jeremiah cut him off. He caught Rourke's arm in a joint lock. "He had dignity." The pressure increased. "He had truth." There was a sharp crack as the bone gave way. Rourke screamed, collapsing to his knees. Jeremiah pulled out a phone and started recording. "Tell the truth," he commanded. "All of it. The bribes, the developers. Why you really killed Slim." "You're crazy!" Rourke's words cut off as Jeremiah applied pressure to the broken arm. "The truth. Now." The confession poured out between sobs of pain. The systematic harassment of homeless people to clear valuable properties. The kickbacks from developers. How Slim had witnessed a payoff and had to be silenced. "I'm sorry," Rourke blubbered. "I'm sorry." "Slim can't hear you." Jeremiah's voice was ice. "But the world will." He zip-tied Rourke's hands and feet, ignoring the officer's continued pleas. With military precision, he dragged him to the base of a massive billboard overlooking the highway. Using more zip ties and rope from his pack, he secured Rourke to the metal support beam. The sign he taped to Rourke's chest was written in clear black letters. He reached for power. I reached for justice. Jeremiah picked up Rourke's gun, methodically disassembling it and scattering the pieces across the lot. The badge he placed in Rourke's lap, a final symbolic gesture. Cars were already slowing on the highway, drivers pointing up at the bound figure. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Jeremiah melted back into the shadows as red and blue lights appeared on the horizon. The last thing Rourke saw before the police cars arrived was Jeremiah's silhouette against the dying sun, standing perfectly still. Then he was gone, leaving only the evidence of corruption and the truth Slim died protecting. The recording was already uploading to multiple secure servers. By morning, there would be no place left for lies to hide. No shadows for injustice to lurk in. The light Slim had tried to shine would finally break through. Traffic on the highway had come to a complete stop. Phones recorded Rourke's humiliation from every angle. The truth, like Jeremiah himself, had become impossible to ignore. The morning sun cast long shadows across the newly planted memorial garden. Where concrete and despair had once ruled, flowers now bloomed in carefully tended beds. Cherry trees lined fresh-laid paths, their young branches reaching toward the sky like hopeful hands. The space under the overpass had been transformed. Gone were the makeshift camps and barrel fires. In their place stood polished stone markers, each one bearing a name and date, silent testimonies to lives cut short by violence and indifference. At the center of it all, a bronze statue caught the light. Slim's likeness smiled down at visitors, his familiar philosophical expression captured perfectly in metal. His hands were open, welcoming, just as they had been in life. The base bore his full name, Reggie Slim Dillard, and beneath it, words taken from his own journal. We were never voiceless. They just never listened. Hundreds of people filled the garden for the opening ceremony. Some wore suits and formal clothes, others the worn garments of life on the street. They stood together, united by memory and purpose. Mama Cass moved through the crowd, her head held high, greeting people with fierce hugs and whispered blessings. Little D worked his way through the gathering with his camera, documenting everything. His lens lingered on the other memorial stones, names that might have been forgotten if not for Slim's sacrifice and the change it sparked. Tamika Dillard stood at a small podium, her nurse's scrubs replaced by a simple black dress. Her voice carried clearly across the hushed crowd. "My father believed in the power of truth," she said, her words steady despite the tears in her eyes. "He believed that if people just saw each other, really saw each other, things would change. This garden isn't just about remembering. It's about seeing. Every name here was somebody's child, somebody's friend, somebody's family." She gestured to the surrounding plants and paths. This used to be a place where people hid their shame, the shame of poverty, of homelessness, of how we as a society failed our most vulnerable. Now it's a place of honor. Every flower that blooms here is a reminder that beauty can grow from darkness, if we're brave enough to plant the seeds. Detective Morales stood off to the side, watching the ceremony with tired but satisfied eyes. Under her arm, she carried a weathered notebook, Slim's journal, its pages now evidence in multiple corruption cases. Later that day, she would place it in the city archives, where researchers and justice advocates could access its truths. The crowd moved through the garden after the speeches, reading names, leaving flowers. Some shared stories of those they'd lost. Others just stood in silence, remembering. Mama Cass led an impromptu prayer circle near Slim's statue, her voice rising in song. Little D's camera caught snippets of conversation. "Remember how he always shared his coffee? Used to quote Shakespeare, right out of nowhere. Helped me get clean. Showed me where to find help. Never gave up believing things could change." The garden itself seemed to hold these memories, each plant and stone a keeper of stories. Benches invited people to sit and reflect. A small fountain provided gentle background music, its water catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. Near the back of the crowd, partially hidden by one of the cherry trees, stood a solitary figure. His clothes were clean but simple, his bearing straight despite the weight of years. For a moment, a shaft of sunlight broke through the overpass shadows, illuminating his face. Jeremiah's features were weathered but peaceful, his eyes taking in everything with quiet intensity. He watched Tamika embrace supporters, saw Morales speaking softly with city officials. His gaze lingered on Mama Cass as she blessed the ground with holy water. Little D passed nearby with his camera, but didn't notice the still figure in the shadows. The sun shifted, and Jeremiah began to move. His steps were unhurried, measured, carrying him between groups of mourners and celebrants. No one turned to watch him go. No one called out his name. He was like his old nickname, a ghost, present but unseen, part of the story but not its center. He passed the last row of memorial stones, each one a marker of change bought at too high a price. The garden's new fence gleamed in the morning light, its gate standing open in welcome. Beyond it, the city continued its endless motion, traffic flowing, people hurrying past. Jeremiah's shadow stretched behind him as he walked away, growing fainter with each step. Behind him, voices rose in song, Mama Cass leading the crowd in an old spiritual. The words floated after him on the breeze, a reminder and a blessing, as he disappeared into the flow of everyday life. The packed courtroom buzzed with nervous energy as Officer Blake Rourke stood before justice. His orange jumpsuit had been traded for an ill-fitting gray suit that hung loose on his frame after months in detention. The metal handcuffs gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the badge he once wore with such arrogance. Two stone-faced U.S. Marshals flanked him, their presence a reminder that his days of authority were long gone. In the front row, Tamika Dillard sat with perfect posture, her nurse's scrubs replaced by a modest black dress. Her fingers were intertwined with Mama Cass's weathered hands. The elderly woman's eyes never left Rourke's face, as if memorizing every moment of his downfall. Detective Morales sat beside them, her badge prominently displayed, a silent statement about which side of the thin blue line she'd chosen. "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed. Judge Martinez entered, her black robes flowing as she took her seat. The room fell into absolute silence. "Proceed with the evidence," she commanded, her voice carrying to every corner of the hushed courtroom. The prosecutor stepped forward, remote in hand. "Your Honor, the people present, Exhibit A." The screen flickered to life. Rourke's face filled the display, illuminated by harsh light. His confession, extracted by Jeremiah's careful planning, began to play. "Yeah, we targeted Dillard." Rourke's recorded voice echoed through the speakers. He was poking around where he shouldn't. Developers paying good money to clear that block. Can't have some homeless vet stirring up trouble. His tone was casual, almost bored, as if discussing the weather instead of murder. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Someone muttered, "Monster," loud enough to earn a warning glance from the judge. Orders came down through channels. The recording continued. "Make it look clean. Make it look justified." Nobody was supposed to care about some street person anyway. Rourke on the screen shrugged, the movement making his zip-tied hands visible. Tamika's grip on Mama Cass's hand tightened until their knuckles turned white. The elderly woman's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Detective Morales took the stand next, her testimony delivered in clear, precise terms that left no room for doubt. "Evidence was systematically destroyed," she stated. "Body cam footage deleted, witness statements altered, crime scene photos went missing. This wasn't just one bad officer. This was institutional corruption." When Tamika rose to read Slim's letter, the room grew even quieter. She unfolded the worn paper with trembling fingers, but spoke with strength that seemed to channel her father's spirit. "My dearest daughter," she began, "if you're reading this, I didn't make it. But don't cry for me. I lived free, even without a roof. I spoke truth, even without a platform. And I loved you, even without your love in return. The streets taught me that justice moves slow, but it moves sure, like water wearing down stone. Remember me not as the man who fell, but as the man who stood up." Mama Cass held up a creased photograph of Slim, his smile bright and defiant despite his ragged clothes. Several jurors wiped their eyes. The jury's deliberation was brief. When they filed back in, their faces were set with determination. The forewoman stood, paper steady in her hand. On the count of second-degree murder, We find the defendant guilty. On the count of conspiracy to violate civil rights, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of official misconduct, we find the defendant guilty. Judge Martinez's gavel crack seemed to echo the finality of the moment. Blake Rourke, this court sentences you to 40 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Outside, the autumn sun painted the courthouse steps golden as Rourke was led to a waiting prisoner transport van. The crowd that had gathered held signs high. Justice for Slim and Justice Delivered waved like banners of victory. Some people cheered, others wept, as the van's doors slammed shut on the former officer. Later, as sunset painted the sky in deep purples and oranges, 3 women walked together past the newly completed memorial. Morales, Tamika, and Mama Cass stopped to admire the fresh bronze plaque that caught the dying light. Reggie Slim Dillard, unhoused, unheard, unforgettable. A nearby bus stop's TV screen flashed breaking news. Corruption probe expands. 6 officers indicted. The headline scrolled past, unnoticed by the 3 women who stood in quiet contemplation before Slim's memorial. Across the street, a hooded figure watched silently, before turning and disappearing into the growing shadows of evening. The Greyhound station hummed with quiet activity as Jeremiah adjusted the strap of his worn leather bag. His clothes were clean now, simple jeans, a dark sweater, and boots that didn't draw attention. The transformation from street survivor to ordinary traveler was complete. No one would guess this calm, gray-haired man had orchestrated the takedown of a corrupt police force just weeks ago. He settled into a window seat near the middle of the bus, movements precise and controlled. Old habits that would never fade. The bag went under his seat, except for Slim's journal, which he kept close. A young mother with 2 kids took the seats across the aisle, offering a polite smile that he returned with a slight nod. The bus driver checked tickets, and the engine rumbled to life. Jeremiah watched Memphis's familiar streets begin to roll past the courthouse where justice had finally been served. Past the memorial garden where Slim's name now stood eternal in bronze, past the overpasses and alleys that had been their home for so long. When the city limits sign disappeared behind them, Jeremiah finally allowed his shoulders to relax. He pulled out Slim's journal, its pages worn soft with handling. A folded piece of paper slipped from between the pages, different from Slim's usual careful writing. This one was hastily written, as if he'd known time was short. The paper crackled as he opened it, the words bringing his friend's voice back clear as day. Ghost, my brother in all but blood. If you're reading this, then what I feared came true. They silenced me, but they couldn't silence the truth. You never stopped being a soldier. But you didn't need a gun to fight. That's what made you different. You understood that justice doesn't always wear a uniform or carry a badge. Sometimes it wears rags and sleeps under stars. Remember that night in '89 when we first met? You were fresh out of the service, trying to disappear. I was just another vet who couldn't adjust. We shared a fire and a bottle, and you told me about Somalia without saying a word. That's when I knew. Some ghosts haunt the living to protect them. You protected me for 30 years, brother. Let my death protect others. Let it mean something. Let it change things. And then, this is important, let it go. Find peace. You've carried enough weight. Your friend always, Slim. Jeremiah's hand trembled slightly as he folded the note back into its careful creases. Outside, autumn colors blurred past the window. Reds and golds replacing the concrete gray of the city. The young mother across the aisle was singing softly to her children, a lullaby about better days ahead. He thought about the changes his friend's death had sparked. The corrupt officers behind bars, the police reform bills being pushed through city council, the new oversight committee that would include members of the homeless community. Slim's daughter Tamika leading a foundation in her father's name. Even Detective Morales had been promoted to lead a new internal affairs division. The bus hummed steadily northward. Jeremiah's reflection in the window looked different now, less haunted somehow. The weight of his Delta Force past, the years of hiding, the rage at Slim's murder. It was all lifting like morning fog. He hadn't realized how heavy it had been until now. A memory surfaced. Slim laughing at one of his own bad jokes, sharing coffee from a dented thermos. You know what your problem is, Ghost? You think peace is something you find, but it's something you choose. Every day, every moment. The bus crossed a bridge over a wide river. Sunlight danced on the water below, bright and clean. Jeremiah felt the tactical part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through war zones and street fights, begin to quiet. There was no more need for hypervigilance, no more targets to track, no more justice to extract. He looked down at the journal one last time, then carefully tucked it away. The mother across the aisle had fallen asleep, her children curled against her like puppies. The scene struck him as perfectly ordinary, the kind of moment he and Slim had fought to protect. Jeremiah leaned his head back against the seat. For the first time in decades, he felt no need to scan for threats or plan contingencies. The mission was complete. Justice had been served. His friend could rest easy, and so could he. The steady rhythm of the highway lulled him as Memphis disappeared behind the horizon. His breathing slowed, matching the gentle sway of the bus. Years of combat-honed instincts finally surrendered to exhaustion. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.